Now to Texas and Ken Paxton's massive runoff victory over four-term Republican Senator John Cornyn. Paxton will face Democratic candidate, State Senator James Talarico in the general election. CBS's Ed O'Keefe joins me now from Austin. He spoke with Talarico earlier today. Ed, take it away.
Major, good to see you. Happy anniversary. Texas thumping last night by Ken Paxton over John Cornyn now sets him up to face James Talarico, state representative from here in the Austin area, a seminarian who's put those studies on hold to run for the U.S. Senate. And he is already facing a barrage of attacks from Republicans from the White House on down. So we sat down today to talk a little bit about how he's framing the race against State Attorney General Ken Paxton and the issue most important to voters these days, the economy. Take a listen. So they're running a handful of highlights of things you've said in the past, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond or clarify. In 2021, in a speech during debate over transgender issues, you said God is non-binary. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think I was being intentionally provocative with that statement. But what it means is that God can't be defined by human categories. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Galatians, says that in Christ there is neither male nor female. I'm always going to stand up for Texans who are being picked on by the most powerful, most corrupt politicians in the country. And I'm going to continue doing that in this race and hopefully in the U.S. Senate. You
call it intentionally provocative. Do you regret describing it that way or talking about God that way?
There are some statements that I've made that I certainly regret. There are statements that I've made where I've missed the mark. I'll be the first to admit that. But Ken Paxton is intentionally clipping my cringy comments to distract from his career of corruption. Ken Paxton has a criminal record. I have a legislative record. I've served for 4 terms in the Texas House of Representatives, where I brought Democrats and independents together to actually make progress for people. I brought Republican legislators and Democratic legislators together to cut property taxes, to raise teacher pay, to lower the cost of housing and childcare and prescription drugs. I've passed more than 60 bipartisan bills as a legislator. I've also called out the extremes in both parties, on the left and the right. I have called out Ken Paxton for his blatant corruption, but I also called out President Biden for failing to secure our southern border.
And I want to get to the border in a second. Let me run one more by you because, again, the president and other Republicans are already bringing it up. Again, in 2021, while debating a bill that restricted transgender student athletes, you said modern science acknowledges 6 biological variations based on chromosomes to argue that sex is a nuanced spectrum, not a strict binary. Do you still believe there are 6 biological sexes?
I know there are 2 sexes, men and women. I also know there's a very small percentage of people who have these chromosomal abnormalities, and I believe they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect.
The other one they keep harping on, and it's perhaps the most curious of all, they say you're a vegan.
I'm not a vegan. I'm an 8th-generation Texan. I've been eating barbecue since before Ken Paxton's first indictment, and this campaign basically runs on Texas barbecue. If all they have is lying about me being a vegan, I feel pretty good about our chances this November.
But, and this is part of where I think we are in politics in this country. Whether you agree or disagree with their focus on those statements on that issue of transgender rights and things like whether you're a vegan, it is an effective argument that Republicans have made against candidates for years. It works for them. And you're going to have to spend time and money explaining it away.
I think the reason that we are leading in every public and private poll against Ken Paxton is because Texans are hungry for a different kind of politics. Texans are drowning. We can't afford the basics. We can't afford groceries or gas or insurance or housing or childcare or our prescription drugs. And Ken Paxton clearly has no solutions to offer us. So while he divides us with these same tired culture war fights, I'm going to keep bringing Texans together to take on his corruption and lower our costs.
And that's where I wanted to go next, because that is the issue voters tell us is number one to them, the economy. Yes. What is an affirmative thing a Senator Talarico would propose to do to cut costs?
Well, I've got a long list. Let's start with grocery prices, because this is something I hear about in every corner of the state. The first thing I think we should do is repeal these crazy tariffs that are driving up costs at grocery stores across the state of Texas. I also hear a lot about the pain at the pump. And I feel it too. I drive a mid-size Chevy Colorado, and I had to pay more than $80 just over Memorial Day weekend for a full tank of gas. I'm proposing that we suspend the federal gas tax, which would immediately drop the price of gas by 18 cents a gallon. I'm also proposing that we suspend the federal diesel tax because everything you buy is shipped by diesel.
Right.
And so because of this disastrous new war in Iran, diesel prices have shot through the roof, increasing the price of everything. And then, I've done a lot of work in Texas around prescription drugs. I'm a type 1 diabetic who has struggled to afford my own insulin. The first time I was diagnosed when I was 28 years old, I paid $684 for my first 30-day supply of insulin. And a lot of Texans are struggling to afford the medicine that they need to live. And so I'm proposing that we cap the cost of more life-saving drugs, and we start a wholesale drug importation program from Canada where they pay half what we pay for the same prescription drugs. So those are three of some of the most pressing priorities, but we could talk about the cost of housing, the cost of childcare, the cost of insurance. All of these things are conspiring to hold Texans back, and it is 50 years in the making. It's been 50 years of trickle-down economics, of billionaires and their puppet politicians like Ken Paxton rigging this economy against all of us, whether you're on the left or the right. And so it's why I say that the real fight is top versus bottom, because it's all of us who are getting screwed, who have to come together to defeat this corrupt system.
You can watch the full interview with James Talarico on CBSNews.com and on the CBS News YouTube page. We should point out, Major, we have made several requests for an interview with Ken Paxton, and we look forward to hearing from him at some point here on CBS over the course of the campaign. Hundreds of millions of dollars expected to be spent by both sides on this one, likely to be the most expensive Senate contest ever, and potentially, if it remains competitive, the one that determines which party controls the Senate next year. Major?
That's why we're very glad to have you there. Ed O'Keefe, thank you.